Welcome back to another week of Bible study. Today, we'll be talking about the story of Abraham, the promise. Hopefully, you enjoy. Let's get into it. All right, cool. Now that we got that up, I'll go ahead and share my page and we'll get started. Before we get into it, is there any questions? Okay. All right. Time to get into it. Okay. Yeah, it has been giving me a couple issues when I've been trying to do my practice runs. So let's try it this way. And can everybody see the screen? Perfect. All right. So, like I said, this is part three, the last part of the story. We have the promise and the test, and we're spanning the last couple chapters of Abraham's story from Genesis 19 to 23. So we pick up right when we left off from Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction. So just to recap, the angels told Lot, his wife, and two daughters, you guys go ahead and get out of here because we're going to destroy this place. They burn the city down with sulfur, brimstone, um, just a full total destruction. We have the picture of Lot's wife turning into a of salt. And we talked about the whole science behind the chemistry of why it wasn't table salt, but more of a pillar, which is a rock. Um, Now, one thing that I didn't mention last week, but I wanted to mention it this week, just because it kind of segues into what we will be talking about soon. The real reason that Lot's wife turned into stone or pillar of salt was not because she just did a little quick glance behind. God is not that petty of a God. What ended up happening was the reason why she got stuck there, froze literally, is because her heart had already abandoned God. God is saving you from this destruction. You know there's some destruction going on, but in your heart, she wanted to go back to her sin. Remember, she's from there. Lot found her there, married her, had kids. So she was already part of that nature. Yes.
Oh yeah, so that's kind of when you said questions, I was trying to figure out our stopping point. Uh, so it's my question because we stopped here and I was asking what is I'm trying to pronounce it right when I was writing it down. Gop Gophrith, Gophrith.
Okay,
It's
so
like
that is the what they called it back then when you mix the sulfur with the water and you have everything together. That's what they called it historically.
okay when just from the after the cities were gone.
No, no, that's what they call the element that rained down on them.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
Yep, yep, yep. So when that happened, that's what they were calling it, and that was what they referred to it. So if anybody ever tries to talk about that story, they'll say that when it rained gopher.
Golfer, that's it. All right, okay, all right, thanks.
Not a problem. Okay, so like I was saying, when Lot's wife turned around, in her heart, she pretty much told God, I'm even if you save us here, I'm gonna go back to doing this life. So anything that would have happened from that point on would have been a continuance of that sin that God was trying to get rid of. There's no telling what was in her mind. And because of that, God said, nope, can't let it go any further. And that's why she was stuck where she was. And the image we get of her looking back, it's more of her heart turning back to sin. So we have Lot and his daughters escaping into the mountains to take refuge. And here we get a crazy story, a crazy, I guess you could say, visual with all the destruction that's going on because it's so crazy. Lot's daughters believe that the world had started all over again. So last time it was a flood, now God burned down the whole world. So because they believed in their mind that they were the last two women on earth, they said, well, how do we have kids? How do we continue our lineage? So they got their father drunk on 2 consecutive nights and both laid with him and conceived. Now, a lot of people wonder, how does that happen back to back? In the Hebrew culture, there was no they didn't believe in contraceptives, even when it did become a thing. There was no, I guess you could say, pull-out method. It was once it was started, it had to finish. So just to understand the reason why this is a problem in God's eyes, and this also starts another curse coming up that God gives to their descendants. If Lot's daughters had waited for Lot to be sober, to talk to their father, for him to pray, and for him to consult with God and figure out what God wanted them to do, if God had then said, go ahead and reproduce, it wouldn't have been a curse. It would have been a blessing. But because they did it out their own ambition, not only that, because of where they came from, the mindset was already first, let's go ahead and do that. It wasn't let's pray, it wasn't let's try to get ourselves reestablished or anything. It's let's go ahead and lay down. And because of that, God went ahead and put let's say, a floating curse that we don't hear about until Deuteronomy. And we will get there in the future. But he pretty much curses them to 10 generations to not be in the blessing of God. So for 10 generations, you guys will be separated from whatever we have going on. And it is primarily for when the Israelites came out of Egypt, they didn't want to help the Israelites, both of them, both of their descendants, and God cursed them from that. But we have Moab, who is the son of the oldest daughter, and all of his descendants are the Moabites, which you always hear about them dealing with the nation of Israel in the desert. And then we also have the youngest daughter, who had a son named Ben-Ami, and his descendants become the Ammonites, which to this day they hold on to that name in the region of Ammon, which is by the Jordan River, still to this day. They still hold to that history. Okay. So the conflict that starts with Lot's descendants. Remember, God never wanted Abraham to leave with Lot in the first place. But because Abraham thought that Lot would have been his descendant that would have inherited everything because that's his nephew, he still has a part in the promise. But because of his two daughters' sins, he's going to be excluded for 10 generations. And 10 is one of those numbers that we talked about. 10 generations in the Bible is a whole new start. After 10 generations, that's when you start again. So if somebody is excluded for 10 generations, you're effectively erased out of the family lineage at that point. So Lot's life was stuck in this sinful cycle because one, Lot was full of himself. Remember, they came from the nation of Ur. They were rich. They had everything they ever wanted. They had the most futuristic, in that sense, civilization up to that point. So whenever Lot seen something good, he went for it. So when his uncle asked him which side of the land do you want, and he picked the side that was leading to Sodom, he kept going to Sodom. He then got kidnapped. He went back. They tell you to leave. There's wars over there. He goes back. Lot knew exactly what was going on in Sodom, and he still got himself involved in it. And when destruction came and he left, Sodom was still within his family through his daughters. So this is where we see the Moabites and the Ammonites become big players in this history. And this is the reason why you see them as one of the main antagonists to the nation of Israel when they're going to the desert. They're not just random people that God just says, yep, those are the people that they're fighting. These are people that definitely have a stake to fight with Israel just because of their descendants or their inheritance through Lot. Um, One of the biggest things with the Moabites is they were worshippers of Chemosh, which was just a deity, a local deity over there, that they would praise for funds, for rain, for fertility, things like that. And because the nation of Israel would not worship that god, the Moabites started a grudge with them. You guys are supposed to be our cousins, and instead you guys won't follow what we follow. And that's what started the beef between them. The Ammonites, they were worshippers of Moloch. And if you hear anything of Moloch still to this day, Moloch is still being worshipped. Moloch is the god of children's sacrifice. So not yes.
Oh, no, I really mean to hit my hand, but I will say that it is a Moloch has been a lot more talked about recently with this whole Epstein file, Judaism, Jewish, all this stuff going on.
Hmm. It is it's like a taboo, but it's like a taboo worship that they don't speak about, but it's still being worshipped underground. So to worship Moloch, you ask him for a gift or a blessing, and to get it, you sacrifice a baby. Have a baby, sacrifice that baby, and the blood of that baby is what gives you your blessing. That's the payment for it. If you don't have a baby, you find a virgin girl, sacrifice her. And as Michael just pointed out, a lot of that has been being brought up with the Epstein files that are in the news because those are some of the worships that have been going on in the background. This is all still related to Molech. Um, the Ammonites, like I said, they're very territorial. They're very prideful. This is the reason why, still to today, the nation of Ammon, by the Jordan River or in the Jordan Valley, they still keep their roots. They still trace their roots all the way back to Ben Ami. They are very proud of their history and the fact that Moloch was still staying alive through them. Now, this is not in the Bible study. This won't be till a lot further, but just a little tidbit. This is the reason why King Saul lost his throne to King David. God told him to get rid of them, and he didn't. He killed some of them, kept some of their stuff, some of their women and their kids, and that's how he lost his blessing and David became king because of the Ammonites. God wanted to get rid of them so that way they would not become a problem in the future. When we don't listen, things can become generational to the point where they become issues for everybody else. All right. So after we get done with Lot and his drama that's going over on the backside, um, we have Abraham, who is still outside, still a nomad, still wandering from point to point. We've seen that he was trying to, last time before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, we see that he was intercessing on Lot's behalf in the city of Sodom. where he asked God, hey, if you find 50, if you find 45, and just kept giving all these numbers, if you find that many people in that city, will you destroy it? And God said, finally, when he was getting frustrated with Abraham, he said, listen, if you find even just 10 people, I won't destroy it. He didn't find that. So as you see, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. So now we come back to Abraham. There is another famine about to start. And so they go to this land called Gerar. It is the part of the promised land. It's what we know as today as Gaza, the Gaza Strip. That's where they were going. It's currently owned by King Abimelech, who is of the Philistines. When Abraham went there, everybody knew of Abraham because now Abraham is like a celebrity. Everybody around that region knows exactly who he is, but they don't know intimate details. It's not like social media existed. So Abraham, who was about 99, up almost up to 100, Sarah's 89. Okay, two old people with their family, with Ishmael there. Ishmael's starting to become a teenager, 12 to 13 years old, around there. Abraham sees the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and with the famine that's coming because of that, he packed up his stuff and he went. When he gets to Gerar, he already realizes that because Sarah is beautiful, even at her old age, there's no woman that can compare with her. And there's plenty of other books outside of the Bible that's in Hebrew or Aramaic that talk about the beauty of Sarah. He feared for his life. Again, he claims that Sarah is his sister whenever anybody asks him. So we have a relapse in his faith. Remember, God told him to trust him, that he'll take care of him and his family. He doesn't need to worry about nothing. This happened all the way back in Genesis 12, where in Egypt, he told Pharaoh that that was his sister. He's telling Sarah again, hey, look, anybody asks, you're my sister. If you have God on your side, you don't need to do all that. Go into the city, have your freedom, have your safety, and then leave. But because he does that, Abraham starts trouble. This is Genesis 20, verse 12. Abimelech, the Philistines, he had a habit of just taking women. Whenever he seen something that looked beautiful, he would just take that woman and add that woman to his harem. This is in Genesis 20, verse 2. So this is part of his practice. Now, when Abimelech sees and hears of Sarah, he just goes up, hey, take her, she's mine, just like that. All because he believed that that was just his sister and unmarried. It's really funny because it wasn't found out later that that's his wife, all because somebody peeped them taking a shower together. Okay? God was not pleased with Abraham's display of faith. Abraham, just like us, is a regular human being. One day you trust God, the next day you're dealing with a new situation, all of a sudden, all that bravado and that trust that you had in him is now gone. So we see how this becomes a curse. Abraham is no longer just a regular guy. He's no longer Abram. Remember, his name being Abraham means God is within him now. He is now a prophet. So while he was there, Abimelech didn't even get a chance to touch Sarah. God intervened and gave him a very, very crazy dream and literally told him, you're as good as dead because of the woman you have taken, for she is someone else's wife. Genesis 20, verse 3. Just plain as day, in his dream, tells him, yeah, you're as good as dead. When that happens, Abimelech responds to God in the dream saying, listen, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. So he says in Genesis 20, verse 4, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? During this conversation, God pretty much acknowledges Abimelech's innocence, and he tells him, listen, I just need you to return Sarah to Abraham. Genesis 20, verse 7, he emphasizes he is a prophet. And this is the first time God verbally says he is a prophet. And he will pray for you and you will live. Now, we'll pause for a second there. When you see that you will live, it's as if Abimelech was going to die. Abimelech was already cursed, Mark, and he didn't even know it. All because of what Abraham did. Right here, Abraham never knew that he was already walking in a certain type of power. When God has already given you a blessing or has touched you in a sense, there's certain places you can't go. There's certain things you can't say, certain things you can't do, because if you have a lapse, you can cause for your family to have some problems. You can cause for your children to have some problems. You can cause for your friends to have some problems. And Abraham is going to realize just how much problems he just caused a whole kingdom. The next morning, Abimelech calls his servants and important officials, and they pretty much talk over what happened in his dream. This is a pretty big situation. They all agreed to return Sarah back to the husband because the state of affairs at that moment is really grave. We'll go to the next slide and I'll explain. The reason why he had to talk to the officials and they all had to agree to give Sarah back was because as soon as they took Sarah, every woman in that country no longer was able to have children. They all became barren, just like Sarah. That was God intervening. If they were pregnant 8 to 9 months, they were in great pain because now their wombs were blocked and they couldn't deliver their kids. Even if they're dilated, couldn't deliver their kids. Baby just stuck. If you're trying to get pregnant, you would be in great pain. Nobody who was a woman in that region was safe because Abraham literally cursed everybody just by doing that selfish act. So, in God's glory, just to teach Abraham a lesson and to teach the kingdom a lesson, he had everybody match Sarah's condition. For this one woman, I closed everybody's wombs. So once everybody agreed to give her back, Abimelech started to question Abraham and asked him, really, why did you lie? You could have brought a big issue onto this whole kingdom because, again, as a king, that's his people. If they're having some problems, that means the community would never continue. There would be no more kids brought and born, and that would have been the end. He would die because there would be no protection. Everybody would be upset with him. It causes a big situation. So then it looks like Abraham just came over there to start trouble. Okay? So in addition to returning Sarah, Abimelech offers Abraham the same thing like Pharaoh: livestock, servants, and silver. A lot of silver, shekels of silver. And that's a gesture of goodwill. Up to this point, Abraham, from Pharaoh and everything that he's been to, was already kind of like a millionaire. This right here, again, almost tripled how much he had. So he's a mega millionaire now. So he gave all that extra silver just because he wanted to make sure that Sarah wasn't upset and Abraham wasn't upset. Okay? He also gave Abraham permission to dwell wherever in the land he wanted to stay. Because remember, Abraham is a nomad. What he doesn't realize is this is already part of God's will because this is part of the promised land that God already gave to Abraham and his descendants. So no matter what we do, good or bad, God is still going to use it for his glory. His word is definite. He already told Abraham this land will be yours. Abraham has already mapped it out. Abraham's already traveling around these places. Everywhere his foot steps is part of his promise. And he's not walking in that. He's still walking in faith. And what people don't understand sometimes is just because God has changed your name and your very nature, you still have that other part in you. This is the difference between the spirit and the flesh. When you get baptized, sometimes you can operate in your spirit, the person who's baptized, or you can revert back to the flesh, which is the difference between Abram and Abraham. When he walked into Gerar, he was acting like Abram. And now God's pretty much telling him, you need to act like Abraham. So as this is happening, God asks Abraham to pray. Now, the conversation that King Abimelech has with Abraham, because he's so worried about what has happened between the two, he said, listen, you're a prophet. I need you to pray for me. I need you to pray for my kingdom. I need you to pray for everything in my life. Okay? Please bless me. Now, remember, Philistines don't believe in God. They worship pagan gods. So here we have a pagan kingdom now asking Abraham to pray for him, to intercede on his behalf to God. You wake up in the middle of the night, a random God that you've never prayed to, all of a sudden speaking to you, having conversation with, and you're going forward with having a prayer. This is just to show you just how strong, when God afflicts somebody who's against you, you see just how far his power will go. Okay? Now, Abimelech already fearing for his life, still in fear. He asked for that prayer. When Abraham prays, not only did he unlock blessings for the Philistines, he unblocked the curse that was on all the women in the nation. All the pain subsided, but everything that was afflicting Abimelech's household was also cured just from that one prayer. But what Abraham didn't realize, when he's not operating as Abram, but he's operating as Abraham with God with him, his prayer has so much power from that one prayer that he did for the whole community, because he wasn't doing it out of a selfish place. He wasn't doing it out of fear. He was doing it within power. He unlocked blessings for not only that kingdom, but also for his own wife. The fact that everybody else's wombs were opened, Sarah's womb was also opened as well. Whole time, they're trying to figure out, how is Sarah going to have a baby when she's been barren her whole life? Almost 90 years old. And all it took was for Abraham to pray with faith and actually believe that God was going to do something for them. Abraham could not pray enough, let alone trust God enough to set Sarah free. We're talking about a God that can do the impossible. He already told you it's going to happen. Whole time he's waiting on Abraham to open up the door. Abraham never knew it, because Abraham spent too much time operating as Abram and doubting God, seeing miracles left and right and still doubting God. Who does he sound like? Like us, like regular people. See miracles and blessings each and every day. The fact that we all made it to 2026 through everything, each one of us have a personal journey. It's nothing short of a blessing. Yet we still question. Yet we still don't trust. Yet we still don't believe that one word from God could literally set everything free. So the fact that they were part of this kingdom, notice when the king gave them free reign to live anywhere. They became citizens automatically. So when Abraham prayed for the citizens of that country, Sarah is already taken accounted for. So because Abraham was doing without any selfish intent and was doing what God asked him to do for the citizens of Gerar, he ended up blessing Sarah. Now, I want to go over 5 key elements on why what Abraham did here shows exactly, and this is mainly for the guys, but for the women here, this is what you should be looking for in a husband. Now, guys, this is something that you should also internalize when you're walking by yourself with God. Okay. So we have called the 5 pillars of household leadership. Okay. So if you're taking notes, write this down. One of the pillars is cultivating a steadfast relationship with God. Okay. That means praying, fasting, being on your P's and Q's. So that way, when you talk to God, you know exactly what you're talking about. You know your verses. You know exactly how to meet him where he's at. Okay. Second one, walk boldly in faith and trust. I think that's pretty simple enough. For you to be a leader, you have to be bold. You have to walk like a man. So that means to be a Christian leader, to be a Christian father, to be a Christian brother, to be a Christian husband, you got to walk boldly in faith and trust that God has your back. You have to trust that he's there with you all day, every day. Number 3, know the word to lead effectively. Not just, oh, I know Psalms 23, I know the Lord's Prayer, and that's it. No, learn your word. This is why we're in Bible study. Learn your word. It used to be a requirement before you got married, before you were considered a man in your community. You had to know your word and have to recite it by mouth, the whole thing. So knowing your word means you know exactly to what extent God will protect you. You know what God will do and what he won't do. So now when you speak a blessing or a word over your family, you know exactly what God can do and what you need to do. So that's number 3, knowing your word. Number 4, using the power of prayer to bless others. This actually, number 4, takes us back to Genesis, when God is talking to Adam and Eve and telling them what they have. He gave them dominion. Remember, we talked about the bodies being the spirit inside of a hummus body, manna in a hummus body. One of the things that he gave beings that have the spirit inside of a human body is dominion over earth. If you do not have that, you have no power on earth. When you use the power of prayer, often we say, God, use me, right? When you say that, a lot of us pray for things for ourselves. God, I need to pass this class. I'm in that boat. God, I need the bills paid. God, I need a new car. God, I need a new job. God, I need for this to work. God, I need for that to work. I need healing. I need this, that, and third. Most of the time, God does not want you to pray for yourself. Because let's think about it. Abraham has probably spent his whole life praying for Sarah to have kids. We know in the beginning, before God commissioned him to leave, he was doing all types of crazy things in with the other deities and other gods to try to get Sarah to have a kid. And it was going nowhere from him. None of those other gods could actually help him reach that point. So if the real thing the whole time was for him to pray for others and not for himself, and that's all it took, it gives more meaning and understanding when we say, God, use me. When we're actually saying those words, what we're praying for is, God, use this vessel, because you said on earth, the only people who have dominion is a spirit inside of a hummus body. Push me to the side, use my hummus body, and do your work. Think of it as a to-do list. There's so many other things that God has to deal with on earth. that people have been praying for generations. And God says, finally, somebody gave me a chance to use them. I'm gonna go take care of that. In the process of God blessing others, that's how you get blessed. It's not about God bless me or do this for me. Stop praying for ourselves and pray for others. That's how you end up praying for yourself. Because when others are blessed around you, their blessings also wet you. It's kind of like a shower that stays on and you're sitting next to it. You still get wet by the fallout of that blessing. When you learn to use that power of prayer that way, I guarantee you, as a man, as a husband, as a father, you'll start to see everything else in your house start to be watered up. Start to see everything that you do with your hands at work, your business, your job, your friends, whatever, your classmates. You'll start to see the power of that prayer when you're praying for them start to water back to you. Pray for your boss. Pray for your teachers. Pray for your coworkers. Watch how it works for you. And number 5, lead a blessed life as a protector, not a runaway. Reason why I put not a runaway is because Abram was a coward. Every time he goes somewhere new, he's lying and saying, this wife of mine is my sister. Oh, I'm going to use her as a shield. I'm going to hide behind her. No, be a protector. Do what Adam didn't do in the garden. Adam let the serpent talk to Eve instead of protecting her. One of his faults. Don't continue the cycle. Lead by example. So lead a blessed life as a protector, not a runaway. And those are your 5 pillars for household leadership. What's significant about these 5 things, this is what every prophet has to walk with. When you're doing this, you become the prophet of your own household. And I guarantee you, operating within this, watch how things change in your life. So let us continue. After Abraham does all those 5 things and actually prays and releases everything in that country, the fulfillment ends up happening. Abraham is 100 years old. Sarah is 90. You tell me what 190-year-old person that you know is having a baby, a healthy one at that. So now, God makes Abraham the father of many nations. The fulfillment of that covenant comes to fruition. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, which is why his name is Isaac. And everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And that's the quote from the verse. Everyone who hears about this will laugh with me because this is ridiculous. An old lady like me having a baby. So now, a little culture dive yet again. When a baby is about 2 to 3 years old, in these ancient communities, they used to have what they call a weaning ceremony. Okay? So in Genesis 21, verse 8, we have Abraham holding a great feast. Okay? What is weaning? Is the process of switching an infant's diet from breast milk to formula or to other solid foods. So they always would do a weaning ceremony. It lasted about 4 to 5 days, and they would celebrate. They pray, they anoint the baby, and they tell God, "Thank you for the blessing." Reason being, remember, God already gave the covenant of circumcision. Up to that point, the mortality rate for babies and for people having sex back then, they didn't last long, especially in the desert, sweat, diseases. The death rate was pretty high. Now, when you had a baby, because of the environment that the baby would be born in, the mortality rate was also very high. Came from somebody who was probably sick because again, they didn't take any baths, and now this baby's being born, and most of the time there wasn't sufficient enough clean things to actually take care of the baby. So the fact that now with the combination of circumcision, we start to see a big drop in the babies that are being born, or big drop in the mortality rate in the babies that are being born. So the weaning ceremony was a way to say, okay, the baby has survived. The baby has made it through that first portion of their life that usually was tumultuous. They didn't survive that much. So now that they are, let's celebrate. When Isaac is around this age, Ishmael is about now 14 years old. That's a teenager in our society. What is also important is this is where in a Hebrew culture, since this hasn't been established just yet, but the duties that would have been given to Ishmael is he would have been starting to now do things like Abraham. He would have been starting to learn his word. Okay. There's no word yet, but what he knows now is he knows everything from creation all the way down to Noah's Ark. And of course, his father's history. He can say it orally. Abraham is raising him, and the text actually gives us the wording where it shows that Abraham really loved his son Ishmael. Now he has two sons. He loves both of them. He knows one is the promise and one is not, but he knows both of them are going to be great. So he's happy. He loves them both. He has been raising Ishmael to be a man just like him. So now that's what Ishmael's doing. Now, during this weaning ceremony, Sarah sees Ishmael mocking Isaac. Okay. And this is where I tell you guys all the time, it's good to learn Hebrew if you ever get a chance. At least look at some Hebrew words, because what we get translated into English is mocking. But in reality, the word that's being used in Hebrew is actually for making fun, not making fun of, but in a sense, making funny faces, playing with the baby. Now, we know whenever there's a baby, we always make funny faces towards babies. That's just common sense. That's what we do. However, Sarah's so bitter, she literally says, banish that slave woman and her son. For the son of that slave woman will not be an heir along with my son Isaac. The only offense that Ishmael did was playing with his little brother. And Sarah used it to kick him out the house. Remember, Sarah was the one who instructed Abraham to have this baby in the first place. Sarah was the one who wasn't patient enough to wait for God's hand in her life. Sarah was the one who led that destruction in her household. And because of that, and Abraham listening to the voice of his wife, just like Adam did in the garden, they both rehearsed the cardinal sin of eating the fruit. Once that happens, you know there's always a fallout of sin. Because of that, those two sons, it starts a whole generations that lasted to today of war that is still being fought through Israel and Iran, Iraq. Literally, they're bombing each other right now. The children in Gaza, this is nothing but the fallout of Abraham and his two sons. If Abraham was again leading like a man and walking with those 5 pillars of leadership when he was Abram, none of this would have happened. It would have just been Isaac and we wouldn't have these problems. But remember what I said in the second Bible study of Abraham, because of that, that is the curse that he inquired and incurred of himself just because he listened to Sarah instead of listening to God. Now, when Sarah tells Abraham, kick them out, Abraham said, enough is enough. I love my son, and you're not going to kick him out of this house. And it gets so bad that God has to now instruct Abraham, this is the time I need you to listen to Sarah. Don't worry about Ishmael. Isaac is the seed, but Ishmael will still be blessed. Go ahead and send him off, him and his mother, and your son will be okay. What the text doesn't show us is that periodically Ishmael does come back to see Abraham. We see that even in the death of Abraham, Ishmael is there to bury his father with Isaac. They still keep in contact. The Bible makes it seem like he just disappears for the rest of life. No. He's a city away, he's in the desert, but he had to be away from Isaac because he cannot share in that blessing with him. So, as we get into the desert, we see Abraham gave them money, gave them clothes, gave them food, gave them some livestock, pretty much set them up. He finished teaching his manhood to Ishmael and said, listen, you're going to be fine. Go out there and be great. Sends them off. And we see at the end of the text that he is actually, I think this is at the end of chapter 21, we see that he's upset that he had to send away his son. But when he does this, they go out into the desert. They finally survive. They're making it. Once the money runs out, once the food runs out, they're on the last leg. They're dying of thirst, dying of hunger. Hagar, being so upset about her condition, she puts Ishmael to lay underneath a high bush, is what they call it. Pretty much means a cliff with a bush on top of the cliff, and it provides a lot of shade. So she puts him there because it's the only cool place. And she goes sits in the middle of the desert because she said, I don't want my son to see me die, and I don't want to see him die. So at least if he dies of this thirst, he'll be in the shade, and he won't have to see his mom dying in the hot sun. So as she's crying, an angel comes out to him, or to Hagar, and says, why are you crying? And she goes, pretty much, you see my condition. And he goes, stop crying, because God has heard your son's tears. Not Hagar's tears. He already talked to Hagar before and told her everything would be okay. He now talks to Ishmael and tells him he's going to be okay and he will walk with him. So when Hagar figures that out, she opens up her eyes from that prayer and that conversation. She looks and she sees a well. Remember, we talked about these wells. These wells are these meeting points that God always changes somebody's destiny. This is where he meets them, talks to them, and then boom, things change. It's at their lowest point. So Hagar calls this place El-Wa, okay? The God who sees, which is why if you see that in church and they call him El-Wa or Wa, it means the God who sees. Remember, God has a name for every situation and every circumstance, every season. That's what his names come from. So after this happens, they survive. Ishmael grows into a skilled archer. He's a warrior. And of course, his descendants become the Arab nations that we know today. 12 Arab nations. All of them could trace their lineage back to Ishmael. Now, as you can understand, Iraq, Iran, all of those, remember when I gave you guys the list, one has the physical blessing and the other one has the spiritual blessing. Isaac has the spiritual blessing through the covenant. Ishmael has the physical blessing through being Abraham's first son. So this is the reason why they fight over that land in the Middle East to this day. Because the descendants of Ishmael believe Abraham was our forefather. We deserve this land. And why do they believe that? After Ishmael becomes this great warrior, he goes to this city that didn't serve any god. All they had was the Code of Hammurabi, if you remember that from history, and they had a set of strict rules. An eye for an eye, You pay, you get what you deserve. That's all they had. And he quickly became the king or ruler of that nation. So now he has the knowledge of who God was, and that's who they serve. And in these strict guidelines, these rules on how they govern their life, they're very strict. This is what becomes the groundwork for what would happen centuries later, as we know as the Muslim faith, Islam. That's where Islam gets a lot of their strict rules from here. When Ishmael starts his first civilization, that's how that gets cultivated that way. Now, as you see the Middle East, we usually know them as people who historically are Islamic nations. This is where all that starts from. Okay. Hagar goes, the text tells us Hagar goes back to Egypt, finds Ishmael a wife, and his sons are the ones that become the Arab princes, my bad, not princess. Now, let us move forward. Once we get to Genesis 22, we get to what we call the final test. God calls upon Abraham and he says, look, it's been a couple years now. Ishmael is gone. Isaac has grown into a young gentleman. He is getting closer to his 12, 14 years of age. And he says, take your son, your only son, whom you love, and sacrifice him. The response that Abraham gave was no hesitation, no argument, literally the elimination of doubt. Everything that Abraham has struggled with to this point, on this final test, God asked him something, and he responds with no hesitation. Usually he would have talked back and he didn't say nothing. He's like, okay, cool. So God tests Abraham by giving him that commandment to go to the mountain on Moriah and offer his son as a burnt offering on the mountains. Genesis 22, verses 1 to 2. It's a shocking request because, again, God just gave me this son. He said that this is where my descendants are going to come through. As we see, without hesitation, Abraham is obeying. And early the next morning, he sets out with Isaac and two of his servants. The mountain of Moriah is 3 days away. 3 days. So they're traveling for 3 days. And for those 3 days, he knows he has to kill his son. Imagine you just got rid of your first son. Now you have to also get rid of your second son. I don't know if anybody's catching my drift yet, but physically separated from one, not spiritually being separated from the second. Isaac is carrying the wood for sacrifice when they finally get there. Okay? They get to this mountain. Abraham tells the other two servants, stay right here. And he takes Isaac up the mountain with him. And the text gives this vivid picture that Abraham, even though he is sad and tears are coming down his eyes, he's still going to follow what God asked him to do. Because in his mind, he already knows, even if he kills Isaac, God has no choice but to resurrect him because that's the promise. This is how much his faith has grown. Remember, just almost 10 years prior, when he was talking to King Abimelech, he was ready to lie again and curse the whole country. 10 years later, after he has Isaac, he has now walked into that finality of faith, and he trusts God so much that he knows if God promised me this, it's going to happen. So he tells me to kill my son. I know he's going to bring my son back because he already promised me that this son was going to be the one to open up my future. So when he tells the two servants to stay at the bottom of the hill, and he brings Isaac up with him, he carries a flint knife to start the fire, and he has Isaac carry the wood for the sacrifice. Isaac, understanding what's going on and seeing just how mournful his father is, he follows and respects exactly what his father's telling him to do. Very obedient. And he asks his father, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" To which Abraham responds, "God himself will provide the lamb." Now, there's a couple elements I'm going to break down that happens in this verse from verses 7 to 8. That's beautiful. When Abraham gets up to the top of the mountain and they start praising worship, he builds the altar, he binds Isaac up. Isaac doesn't fight back. He accepts his fate. As Abraham is crying and he raises the knife to go ahead and strike down his son, fire's already started. He's ready to kill his son on top of that altar. An angel of the Lord halts him and says, "Stop. Now I know you have faith in the Lord. Pretty much you passed the test." And when he's done crying, it says, as he wipes his eyes, and this is in Hebrew, of course, as he wipes his eyes, in the bush, in the thicket of the bush, he sees a ram. And that ram is the substitute for the atonement of all the sin that Abraham has occurred up to that point by not trusting and believing in God. Every curse that he has made and started, the separation of Ishmael and Isaac, literally everything. And I'm gonna go back a slide, when Isaac is carrying the wood for the sacrifice, we don't even realize that this is a beginning of a prophecy that Jesus is also going to be carrying his own wood for his own sacrifice. His father is going to sacrifice him. The symbolism was already there. When Isaac asked, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham responded, not realizing that as a prophet, as walking in power, everything you say has power. When he said God himself will provide the lamb, not only was he speaking the prophecy of Jesus Christ in the future, he was also talking about what would actually happen once he passes his test. The thicket shows the thorns, because it's not just a regular bush. The thicket shows that it's a mangled up bush. The ram was stuck in it. It was thorny. It pierced him. It represents the crown that Jesus had to wear. It shows the substitution that the lamb would take. It's held up, it's barred up. That's going to be sacrificed in our place. Isaac represented that lamb. And even if he didn't want to die, he willingly went along with it, knowing that his father had something to do, had a job to do. It wasn't for him, but for everybody else. And this is how Isaac also gets his blessing, because now he allowed faith to be worked through him as well. Now, we're almost done. So I want to give you guys a guide for, again, if you are writing your notes, this is what we call the anatomy of a faith walk. I know you guys hear it a lot. Faith walk, faith walk. What's your faith walk with God looking like? I'm going to give you what we call the anatomy of that. Okay. Abraham had 7 trials. 7 trials. Remember that number. We start off in Genesis 12, verse 1, where Abraham or Abram is discontent in the world. He can't have a son, can't have an heir. Sarai can't have kids, and he's just not feeling fulfilled in life. Okay? This is literally going to mirror what most people go through and how we have to go through 7 different steps to really get to God and fully trust him. So this is where he starts. God tells him, leave the comfort of your friends, your family, everything you know, and follow me. So what they call the fellowship of discontent. Okay. Second, we get the fellowship with plans. This is Genesis 13, verses 14 and 18, or 14 through 18. This is where God is trying to get Abraham to understand, or Abraham at this point, you cannot make things work. I make things work. Your wife can tell you to do something. Your friends can tell you to do something. But if I tell you to do something, fellowship with me. Don't fellowship with them. Listen to what I already said for you. That's the plan I need you to follow. So we see the difference between what Abraham is trying to do when he's trying to pass on his lineage to Lot. Soon as he brought Lot with him, when God told him to leave everything, he already punished and put Lot in a hole. Lot now has to deal with issues in his life because of Abraham. To get blessings, you're going to also have to lose something in the process. You don't just get it just because. To gain something with God means you got to lose everything else. Lot lost a lot just to get what he had. So, navigating human methods with Lot. That's the second one. Third one, fellowship with the patience of God. So, this is enduring the wait for the promise. He already told you, hey, you already left what I told you to leave, that sin behind. You were trying to do it by yourself, and I told you, stop, trust in me. Now I need you to wait on what I promised you. You said that blessing, I already told you it's yours. Just wait. That's in Genesis 15. Fourth step, the fellowship of hope, or the promise of hope. This is trusting the vision that God is giving you. When you have those dreams, or you're sitting there daydreaming and you see something in your mind, trusting the vision that God has for your future. This is Genesis 15, verses 12 to 21. Fifth step is sufficiency. Fellowship of sufficiency. This is accepting that God by himself is enough. You don't need anything else. Don't try to manufacture a blessing for yourself because, oh, well, it wasn't working, so I try to do it by myself. I try to give God some help. God said, I'm going to have a child, so I went ahead and had the child anyways. This is the blessed one. No, God alone is enough. Just know it's sufficient. Don't do anything else. That is Genesis 17. Okay. Sixth step, fellowship with the justice of God. This is when you see God intervene on your behalf. When you finally trust and believe in him, you'll start to see that the things that you've been looking for will open up. Abraham wasn't trusting God fully. He was there, but it's a 90%. God needs us to fully surrender, not 99, not 98, fully surrender. That's how we get his justice when sin has already claimed our lives. It's in Genesis 18, verses 23 to 33. Just by witnessing that, he made Sarai, or Sarah now, able to have kids. He opened up the door just because you finally trust in me. And the seventh step, and this is just showing you how anybody's life would go if they're trying to have a true faith walk. If you ever want to ask yourself, do I have a faith walk? Has God asked you to leave that sin behind? Have you went through the process of trying to manage it by yourself and God told you, stop, I got this? Did you have to deal with the patience to wait for whatever you're praying for, what God is offering you? Did you have to trust the vision? Did you have to get to a point where God, I can't do, I've hit rock bottom, take over? Sufficiency. And just as God, they told me I wouldn't make it here. I've been seeing all this wrongdoing being done to me, and I felt like it wasn't being taken care of. But now all of a sudden things are starting to change in my favor. And in final, every faith walk has to get this, or else it is not a faith walk. Suffering is what we call the fellowship of his suffering, where we sacrifice what we truly want. when God gives it to us and he asks you, can I have it back? Some of us go, no, 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 God, this is all I needed. I'm gone. 'Cause that's all they truly were following God for. When you can say, you know what, God, you gave this to me. If I give it back, you'll probably give me something more. Having the faith to know that, God, I needed you, not this. I spent this whole walk looking for this, and in reality, I found you. When you can get to that mountain, that Mount Moriah, and suffer and sacrifice your Isaac, now you have the full anatomy of a faith walk. So again, if you're taking your notes, this is the anatomy of a faith walk. Now, what does this breed? The seven fruits, not the fruits of the spirits, but the seven fruits of, or what we call the seven results. Okay. What does the first one give you? Unwavering faith and obedience. Okay. From the discontent. He told you to leave. Now you got faith and obedience. Number two, testing and refinement. When you're trying to make jewelry, you burn it, you melt it down, and you keep doing that until you get all the imperfections out of it. That's what fellowshipping with your plans. Don't try to do it by yourself. Let me handle it. Okay. I got you. Just trust the process. Number three, a spirit of sacrifice. That's what you get from patience. I had to give up some of my free time with my friends, not going to parties, not hanging out with certain people. I had to give it up. I had to sacrifice it. So now that I've gotten these three things, it shows that I've already made it through the first three steps. Number four, absolute trust in God's provision. What is that? Promise of hope for the future. Okay. When we get to number five, a secured covenant and promise. That's sufficiency. Knowing that what God has already given you is enough. He already promised you that vision. It's going to happen. Number six, that justice that's done for you. God said, listen, all the sin and wrongdoing that's been done towards you, it's taken care of. It's been paid for. Number seven, a deep, intimate father-child like relationship with God. Those are the results of a full faith walk with God. If you ever want to figure out if you are walking hand in hand with God, if you have a faith walk, those are the things that you should be testing. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds for the people who are writing notes before I continue. Right? And we're moving on. Again, like I said, the significance of seven. Remember, the numbers do get important from here on out. The numbers mean a lot. And this is why the Bible itself is written in patterns. The 10 generations, the number seven, 7 days, 40 days and 40 nights. All those things mean something. Okay. So 7 trials, 7 results. 7 itself means the number of completion, perfection, or things coming full circle. Okay. It mirrors the 7 days of creation. So with these 7 steps and 7 fruits that come out of it is literally what completes that walk with God. And again, it's a daily thing. You can get there and then go right back to step 1 for another situation. It's a daily walk. You got to walk it every day. So again, 7, number of completion. So if you're writing any notes down and you always hear what's God's number, it's the number 7, the number of completion, perfection, and things coming full circle. All right. And the 7 being Abraham's number as well, because his journey signifies what God has done to finally make him the father of faith. To finish off the story, we get Abraham operating in his godhood, being Abraham. So they make it to Sarah being 127 years old in Hebron. or Hebron, depending on how you pronounce it. And Sarah dies. She made it to the end of her life. She gets to see her son become a grown man, and God lets her breathe her last breath. So, Abraham being fully broken because his best friend, somebody he grew up with, somebody he's traveled and learned who God was from a young age, a young man, all the way to his old age. She's been with him the whole time. He just lost his best friend. So he goes to Ephron the Hittite in the area that he lives in. And he says, "Hey, look, I need a place to bury my wife." And this cave is called the Cave of Machpelah. All right. We'll see this cave again in the future. But Ephron the Hittite, knowing who Abraham is, the Hittites are descendants of Heth. Who is Heth? He is a son of Canaan. And this is their area. So the Hittites, they weren't necessarily bad players with the Israelites, but they've kind of lived hand in hand with them in the land of Canaan. They're known for their military prowess. They had a lot of organization in their stuff. Okay. So when Abraham goes to Ephron, he goes, "Oh, what's up?" He's like, "I need a place to bury my wife, a very humble place to bury her, someplace that's quiet but good." And he goes, "Hey, I got a place just for you. You can have it. It's a gift from me." But Abraham says, "No, mm-mm. I don't want a place that you're going to give me for free." Why? In this type of world, if somebody gives you land or a place like a grave site like this as a gift, generations later, they can actually have it returned back to them because a gift was never permanent back then. So Abraham says, "Nope, nope, nope. I want to publicly purchase this from you. I want this piece of land." So Abraham calls the city officials, everybody out, and he publicly weighs out 40 shekels of silver. Where did those 44, or not 40, 400 shekels of silver come? The silver that he got from King Abimelech years before. He uses his half and Sarah's half, and he pays way over, but just to show Ephron that this is mine forevermore. Little did he realize buying that piece in Hebron was the first purchase to give Abraham a foothold in the promised land. Now, Abraham legally owns land in the promised land. And this is how we start the story of the promised land for the children of Israel. So, last piece before I let you guys go. Abraham was not a spiritual superhero. Okay. We always refer to him as the father of faith. And, this big person who Father Abraham, how many sons, all that. But when we get to this portion, we start to realize that he was nothing but a regular man like us. He struggled with depression. He routinely doubted God's plans. Yet he shows us that it's a daily walk. Every day I got to keep trying. When God gives me an opportunity, I got to keep showing up. I may mess up today, but tomorrow, if I'm still living, I still got breath in my body, keep trying. And so he continued to choose to walk forward in obedience, intercession, and profound faith. He stepped into a relationship with God, the creator, and he shows us that this life, it is not easy, but it's doable. He proves that God's promises hold true, not because we're perfect, but because God is perfect. And so, with that, any questions? I know that was a lot, but that was the ending to Abraham's story. Any questions? All right. if there's no questions or comments, thank you again, guys. Next Bible study will be the story of Isaac, and we'll be on chapters 24 and 25. So not a lot. It'll be a little shorter next week, but that's where we'll be at.
Thank you, Henley.
No problem. So, Stefan, I'll have you go ahead and pray us out, and then you guys are dismissed.
Okay. Let's bow our head and close our eyes. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for today. Thank you for allowing us to come here to gather tonight to just hear about your word.